Hi, it's Rob Bowron with Sharp College Football, and we're back. So apparently I made this video last night by myself. No one saw it. It didn't stream. It didn't record. That's what you get for installing an update and not resetting your computer, I suppose. So we are here for you all to see it the first time and me to do it the second time. Anyway, if this is your first time tuning in, we're running through previewing teams for the upcoming college football season. We've already gotten through the top 10. We're running through from an advanced stats perspective. Everything you see and all the stats you see, well, most of the stats you see, I had that almost nailed down, are going to come from BetaRank, an advanced stats system that is built on data from the same folks that provide data to the College Football Playoff Committee. I do some fancy math on that and then send it on over to the website. Now, all the stats you're going to see are at least controlling for tempo, opponent, and field position. Sometimes they are controlling for more. We'll run through some advanced-ish stats that I still think are important and useful and that people should check out. And I'll talk about why we still use them. This is not an in-depth preview that is going to run through the entire roster nor talk about the depth chart. If you'd like to have one of those previews, find your local beat writer. They will be on it. If you want to hear about players you should be excited about coming out of spring camp, again, find your local beat writer. No one's going to do a better job on it than that. As we run, and I should also say, I do ask that if you are going to watch, if you watch this and you're going to drop comments, that you at the very least make an effort to understand what advanced stats are. Commenting with things like points per game, yards per game, concepts like total defense, is kind of showing up without doing your homework. So those are wildly outdated stats that at the very least don't control for tempo, and importantly don't control for any of the other things that BetaRank controls for. So I'm not like, I don't take comments like that seriously. No one should take comments like that seriously. We're a lot further along in understanding football than total offense or total defense or points per game. Anyway, let's talk about Clemson. I'm excited to talk about this Clemson team. For years, I have talked about, Nick Saban's superpower is actually hiring, that there are two causes of college football entropy, one of which is coaches going off to the NFL, the other of which is staff turnover. Very successful staffs often lose coaches to become head coaches elsewhere. So Nick Saban has done a remarkable job throughout his career of being able to replace very valuable assistants with other very valuable assistants. I mean, we'll see this year. I'm not sold on the Tommy Rees hire. The stats don't love Tommy Rees. That said, Dabo also doesn't like with Nick Saban. Nick Saban's not going back to the NFL. Dabo would be a terrible fit in the NFL. I think Dabo likes to be in a position of power, which you are very much less so as a head coach in the NFL. You are dealing with grown men, and this is their job, and you have to treat them with a little more respect and dignity. Anyway, that's another aside. Dabo, his remarkable superpower in Clemson's long run was that he kept his staff together, and they didn't have guys going out and taking head coaching jobs. Brent Venables was there a really long time. Oklahoma was not the first good job that came Brent Venables' way, I'm sure. But he waited and he bided his time, and he ended up with the Oklahoma job. Now, Clemson's a little bit different in that, like, if you look at let's take the 2019 season as an example. 2019, you have a couple of really, really good teams at the top of college football. All of them except Clemson are defined by their offense. Ohio State that year, LSU, Alabama. Those are all offense first teams that overwhelmingly put up big numbers, on the offense. They had really good defenses too. Clemson had one of the best, comparable to the 2021 Georgia defense, one of the best defenses we've measured that year. And that allowed them to hang, right? Was the absolute quality of that defense. And they had a pretty, just like you would say with Alabama or Ohio State that year, they also had a pretty good, their opposing unit was also pretty good. Like Ohio State had a pretty good defense in 2019. Clemson had a pretty good offense. I mean, at least very good, pretty good, underselling it. Those were all very good units. So Clemson comes in, and this isn't the first time they had offensive problems in 21. They got a new OC in last season. It didn't really work out, though. They did show some improvement. And Dabo, to his credit, didn't sit around on a hand that wasn't working, and he made a change. And I think, particularly when you look at Alabama going out and not getting their top candidates for their offensive coordinator job, Notre Dame then going out and not getting their top candidates for their offensive coordinator job, Dabo sort of sucked in and got a really good hire in Garrett Riley. And I think that, that's one of the reasons to be really excited about this team coming into this year is the offense just should be a lot better. So Dabo, of course, is your head coach. They are at 21 overall in coaching and development. Now, look, Clemson does a good job overall in coaching and development, but we have to tilt this and recency weight it. Clemson in the last few years has been less good at coaching and development, partly because the offense has been mostly not good, and that will ding your score. Clemson also still recruits fairly well. They're at number 14 overall in recruiting. The last two seasons, they haven't really over-indexed. They haven't really outscored what you would have expected based on recruiting and returning production. That's going to hurt their overall coaching and development score. Number 41 overall in Bill Connolly's returning production numbers. It's skewed a little bit towards one side of the ball. Like I said, number 14 overall in their 2-year rolling recruiting average. Number 6 on special teams. This is a good number to keep an eye on for teams that have aspirations near the top. You can't leave money on the table. Special teams in college football is mostly about place kicking. I know fans, I'm probably going to say this in every video, but it's important. Fans tend to focus on outlier events, which are punt returns for touchdowns, kick returns for touchdowns. Giving up either of those for touchdowns, those are very, very rare events. The meat and potatoes, bread and butter of special teams in college football is place kicking. And it matters in particular in college football because not all college kickers are good. This isn't the NFL where most everyone has a really good kicker. College football kickers are much more heterogeneous. You're having a good kicker matters, and it's gonna matter a lot. So having somebody that can step in and make kicks matters. Clemson has been pretty good at special teams overall. Let's go ahead and hop in. We'll run through the offensive and defensive numbers, then we'll run through the schedule, and we'll wrap it up. Oh, I just pumped on the schedule one. Genius. I need some water. Anyway, offensively last season, Clemson finished at number 34 overall. Garrett Riley's your new offensive coordinator, comes over from TCU, where, of course, he did a really good job. Sonny Dykes knows a thing or two about hiring offensive coordinators. Now, they were at number 18 overall in drive efficiency. This is this is a pretty good for where this offense struggled last season. This is probably their best number. They were pretty good at sustaining long drives, putting together plays and finding consistent execution to be able to put up points. Drive efficiency is a reflection of the play caller as well as the coaching and consistency. Explosive drives is big plays. And yeah, there's definitely some coaching component in there. And there's some setup to big plays very often. But it is less the orchestrating an entire drive chess match. Clemson struggled here, 53 overall in explosive drives. These are scaled to the number 1 unit in these. Georgia was the most explosive offense last season. Clemson just simply has to get better here. They have to find a way to put up big plays. They really struggled here. Drive efficiency for a lot of units is one of the more important numbers. Explosive drives is too. They have to get bigger numbers out of here if they're going to improve. Play efficiency, this is their yards per play outside of explosives. They did a decent job here. This is the least important of the core 4 beta rank metrics, number 37 overall. There is significant room for improvement here. 47 in negative drives, too many 3-and-outs, too many turnovers, just too many problems. Now, Cade Klubnik is I should say as well, they were at 69 overall and 21, which is nice, but not good. So the 34 overall represents an improvement. But Dabo knows that wasn't good enough to get it done. They really needed to get back into the top 10, I think, to be dangerous coming into this season. Number 34 in effective rush, 42 in effective pass. They don't have a really big run pass split here. They're going to need to improve at both. Cade Klubnik is your likely starter, or your overwhelmingly likely starter here. He had about 100 attempts last year, 61% completion percentage, 7.0 per. That's not tremendously different than DJU when he was at Clemson. I know a lot of fans are going to blame DJU. I would put a lot more of the offense's problem, there's a reason you've had 3 offensive coordinators over the last 2 seasons, y'all. It ain't the quarterback. Don't get me wrong. There could have been some improvement there. But largely Clemson's problems have been scheme and play calling, mostly play calling over the last couple seasons. The 7.0 per, both of those are going to have to improve. We often talk about the Mendoza line for a modern college football is 63. You'd like to have a quarterback close to 65%. That's going to sustain drives, keep them going. And you'd also like to have a more, closer to 8 or more per for a top offense. They've got some work to do. Low completion percentage and not getting the ball down the field is not a good offense make. Now, they had 2.98 line yards. This is a Football Outsider stat. It's an advanced-ish stat that attempts to assign some portion of credit in the average the average rushing yards to the offensive line. That graded out at number 12 overall. They had a 6% sack rate. That was good for number 5 overall. Now, sack rate is more of a quarterback stat. It'll be interesting to see. One thing that DJU did well was avoid sacks. It'll be interesting to see if if Klubnik's able to continue that going forward. 70% returning production, or 70 in Bill Connolly's returning production coming into this season, 64% coming back. That's a decent amount coming back, even if it only puts him at number 70 overall. On the other side of the ball, pretty good year. Not great by Clemson standards defensively. Now, I should say these numbers are scaled to offense, and Clemson's part of the reason why we do that. So, all the defensive numbers are scaled to what the best offense is. And the reason I do that is partly the 2019 title game where we had the number 1 offense against the number 1 defense. And you might remember how that turned out. It's an offensive football game these days, folks. You got to be able to score points. So I don't want to show you stats if I do these in a side-by-side, which you can do on the site to do a comparison for the team matchups. I don't want to show you stats that are going to give you the impression that the defense is just going to be able to put a really, really good offense in a bag and just contain them, because that's not likely to happen these days. Number 9 overall, they certainly have room for improvement. Last season, Georgia, who still had the number 1 offense overall last season, they weren't nearly as good as they were the year before. Clemson needs to get back to in that 1-2-3 range. I think defensively, or they'd like to. Now, the offense can offset that. If the offense were to suddenly become exceptionally good, get close to a 2 overall number, Clemson can live with a defense that sits in the 3 or 4 range, the 4 or 5 range. Number 7 in drive efficiency, they did a decent job finding ways to get off the field and not give up points. Number 7 overall, I found sound like that's damning with faint praise. That's a really good number, for most any team. It's just hard with Clemson because some of the years Clemson's been just setting the bar on these. 15 overall on explosive drives. This is something they're definitely going to have to improve on. They're going to have to do a better job containing big plays. Number 7 overall in play efficiency. Now, a watch out here is negative drives, not enough 3-and-outs, not enough turnovers. They did cause a lot of disruptive plays, 33% of the time. They rated out at number 6 overall on that, but those didn't necessarily translate to takeaways and 3-and-outs. They need to make more of those count in the coming year. They were number 7 in effective rush, 18 in effective pass. Something to improve on coming into the season is definitely the pass defense. They're going to have to get better there. Wes Blankenship is your defensive coordinator. This will be his second year as the DC. They were number 3 last season, so they were number 3 overall in 21, I should say. Blankenship's he's got to prove that he can hang too. Number 9 overall, I think, is a really good number. I'd like to see them, particularly because they have some production coming back there at number 23 overall, and Bill Connolly's returning production, 75% coming back. I'd like to see them translate this into a top 5 finish this season for them. They could also improve on their third down percentage, 35% on third down allowed. That's number 40 overall. So the schedule here is interesting. Add 1 here because we do have an FCS game. So Clemson, we basically have them at 10 wins, roughly 9.77. Now, if you look through here, you're going to find mostly that they're favored. They have 1 game they're not favored in, but some of these games are closer than you might expect. And it'll be interesting to see. I think Clemson has a really good likelihood with Riley on board. The projection model is not going to see that kind of a change. I think there's a really good likelihood that they are better than their projection with Riley on board. So this Duke game, I think, is one of the best coached teams in college football under Mike Elko. The turnaround job that he did in year 1 was fantastic. Kevin Johns is an excellent offensive coordinator. And really, I think outshined what we'd even seen him do at Memphis. I think even on the road here, this is probably closer to 10 points for Clemson. This FAU game, just don't turn the ball over 3 or 4 times. Of course, you'll be fine. Florida State's the really interesting one, and we're going to get a really early glimpse into both of these teams. Florida State's, they're a little opposite. They have to show defensive improvement, but they've shown continuous defensive improvement, as they've gotten players in. And this year might be the year they're able to put it together. This is going to be a matchup that's going to tell us a bit about where the offense for Clemson and the defense for Florida State sit. It is going to tell us a lot about how good Florida State's offense is and how good Clemson's defense is. Now, we both have those with expectations of being in the top 10, maybe in the top 5. That's a really fun matchup. I'm really excited for this game. Florida State's favored by 7 on the road at Clemson. I might have this one again, like I said, because I think Clemson beats this projection here. I might have this as Clemson by 2. This may be as much as, this may be Florida State favored by 2 or, just a pick'em game. Syracuse is an interesting one. You've got Rocky Long, of all people, as the defensive coordinator at Syracuse. I love that hire. One of the best defensive minds in all of college football. I expect Syracuse to be really salty with him calling plays as defensive coordinator. Jason Beck's your new offensive coordinator there. That'll be an interesting one to see. It's the first time he's called plays in a while. Robert Anae was his mentor. I do think that Syracuse can maybe beat where they're projected at this season overall, but Clemson should still be a pretty hefty favorite in this game. Wake Forest is an interesting one. You mostly keep the coaching staff in place. Wake Forest, of course, though, loses the quarterback to the transfer portal. I think Wake is a really well-coached team, but I think they're going to struggle to keep up with Clemson in this game. I think Garrett Riley innovates with the offense again, and I think this is probably closer to 17 points. Man, Miami, they're almost certain to beat this projection that we have for them at 66. They have just been so bad recently. And last year, the offense was just abysmal. Gaddis was a terrible hire that did not work out. Now they've got some new hires in, and of course they lost their defensive coordinator to Alabama. I like the Kevin Steele hire. I liked it for Mario Cristobal. I like it for Nick Saban. But Now, of course, they're starting all over again. Shannon Dawson's your new offensive coordinator. Lance Guidry's your new DC. Miami's got plenty of room for improvement on both sides of the ball, even though I thought Steele largely did a pretty good job. This for 17, some feels probably more about right here. I think Miami significantly improves off of how bad they were last year, but they have a lot of room that they still have to make up improving, and I don't think they're going to do it in one big giant step. I think it's going to take a little bit. NC State's a fun one. I mean, look, NC State really fell off towards the end last season. They just didn't play well down the stretch in the ACC. That's what really hammered their overall ranking. But I like Robert Anae as an offensive coordinator. I like Tony Gibson as a defensive coordinator. Suddenly I find myself liking this staff quite a bit. I think NC State has an opportunity to beat this projection that we have for them at 53. The offense really drug them down last season. The defense seemed to really fall off towards the end of the year. I think that's less likely to happen this year. This game, if we say both teams beat their projection, this might be closer to 12, I think. Feels about right. Notre Dame, I think Clemson's going to be a heavier favorite at home here. Notre Dame, I don't love the Jared Parker hire at offensive coordinator. He was not good when he was the OC at West Virginia. Notre Dame, of course, has some rebounding to do on defense as well last season, but they've got their work cut out for them. Still a fairly talented team. It feels like a bummer that the Marcus Freeman era is if they had been able to pry Andy Ludwig out of Utah, I feel like we'd be having a very different conversation about Notre Dame. Instead, it feels like a bit of a downer. I think Clemson could be favored by as much as 10 or more by the time this game rolls around. Georgia Tech, they did a really good job. I mean, the new staff kept the defensive coordinator, who was easily the best person on the prior staff. That doesn't change the fact that I think this is still a continuing long rebuild for the Yellow Jackets. North Carolina, man, I don't know. The defense. So look, I mean, there are many reasons to feel that you can talk yourselves into being fairly ambivalent about Phil Longo as an offensive coordinator. I think he was not. I mean, Phil Longo is an all home runs offensive coordinator, whether it's running the ball or throwing the ball. He is just looking to create explosives, and his offenses often struggle with efficiency. That's all totally fair. That said, he's still one of the better offensive coordinators in the game of college football, and he's not there anymore. In steps Chip Lindsey, of course. Gene Chizik, for reasons no one knows, is the defensive coordinator at North Carolina. They've been abysmal the entirety of Max Brown's tenure at North Carolina. I don't expect that to profoundly change. In fact, I think this could be a bit of a down year for North Carolina overall. 17 feels like about right. Maybe it could be more. Look, I like South Carolina. I'm not massively sold on that they're going to get the offense figured out. I do like Clayton White at defensive coordinator. I do like Pete Lembo as the special teams coach there. He's really good. One of the best in college football at special teams. That said, I'm just not sure the Gamecocks are going to get the offense unstuck. This game feels about right at 13.5. South Carolina could beat this projection overall with some offensive improvement, as well as, really at defense too. But I think Clemson's going to, like I said, take a bit of a step forward. Now, if you are a Clemson fan, you are probably interested in not just the conversation. I probably shouldn't talk like that. Not just the conversation around, are you likely to win the ACC? I think you are probably a bit of along with Florida State, maybe a toss up for winning the ACC this season. The ACC still, again, shouldn't be horribly overwhelming, I think, as and the schedule's not, murder. Let's put it that way. But if you want to if you win the ACC and you were to get into the playoff, I do think that there are some things that might work. And we talked about this with teams like Michigan. We talked about this with teams like LSU. Tommy Rees being the offensive coordinator at Alabama, Mike Bobo being the offensive coordinator back in Georgia, puts a little bit more of a cap on how good we think that those units could potentially be and how good those teams could overall be. Georgia's likely to take a bit of a step back offensively with Bobo back in as offensive coordinator. He's never put up the kind of numbers that Georgia put up last season with Monken. So that gives you, if you are Clemson, a little more of a safety net. You're not chasing teams, that are putting up ungodly offensive numbers. You are like, if you were to make it into the playoff, you're likely to run into a team that is merely putting up pretty good offensive numbers. Now, there's some teams out there that we've talked about that mostly have problems on defense that you could talk yourself into if their defenses took a step forward and they were able to put it together on offense. Now, Tennessee, I don't think he's going to have to put it together. They've been putting it together. If they were to take a step forward defensively, they might put a little distance between them and the pack. You could talk yourself into that maybe with Ohio State. Offensively, they have been down a little bit since 2019. They haven't put up the kind of offensive numbers they have in the past. And the defense, of course, they've been fully rebuilding after a bad hire, following 2019. So I think this Clemson team, I would put them up there as much as anyone else. With the Riley hire as a potential contender for the national title this season, I think they're going to have that kind of a rebound offensively. Time will tell if that actually holds up. But I think it will. I think he may not be his brother as an offensive mind, but he's pretty darn good. And like I said, Dabo going out and being able to make this hire was a pretty impressive move. So that's it. Next, we have Tulane, which is a fun one. They might be a little overprojected. They have some staff changes, but they've been a pretty consistent team these last couple seasons. They've returned a decent amount. I'm excited to talk about them, talk about a group of 5 team in these previews. Let's run through the stuff, and then we'll see you next time we do that. I'm Rob Bowron, the econometrician, economy chicken behind BetaRank. You can find all the stats you saw and a whole lot more at sharpcollegefootball.com. You can find me at BetaRank FB or at Sharp College Football. We have a Pac-12 podcast at 12 Pack Radio. You can find all the back episodes of that at sharpcollegefootball.com/12 Pack Radio.